Hello, thanks for clicking on the video. What I'd like to share today is an update on how my treatment journey was going 2 months after diagnosis with rheumatoid arthritis, which at this point had been updated to inflammatory arthritis because I had some additional symptoms that might have indicated psoriatic arthritis as well. So it was still a little bit unclear at this stage. And I'm really happy to be posting this video because one of the things I really wanted to do when I started this channel was to make a series of monthly updates as I went through the early stages of diagnosis and treatment, in the hope that that would be informative or supportive for other people on a similar kind of journey. I did make the first couple of videos for that series at the time, but I wasn't able to carry on with it at that stage because things got a little bit difficult for me. But I did keep detailed notes on what was happening with my treatment for the first 8 or 9 months post-diagnosis. So I thought this could still be a helpful idea to come back to and put the series together over the next few months. The kinds of things I'm thinking to include in these check-ins are what treatments I was having at the time, the effects and the side effects of the medications, talking about how I was feeling about the whole process, so the emotional journey, so to speak, with a condition like this, and also what I was finding helpful at each step of the way. But if there's anything else that you find it useful to hear about, or if any of those things don't sound particularly useful, please do let me know. Leave me a comment, or there's a poll on my community tab asking what people would like to see from this channel. So feedback is always welcome. And if you do let me know, I can incorporate that into the next check-ins. For this 2 month update, the period of time we're talking about is mid-December 2021. And there was quite a lot going on at this point in time, so there's quite a lot I want to share with you with this one. The next check-ins will be shorter though, because not everything was changing on a month-to-month basis. So let's start by talking about treatment. The medications, first of all. I was prescribed two anti-rheumatic medications, or DMARDs for short. Methotrexate, which was 25 milligrams a week in tablet form, and hydroxychloroquine, 200 milligrams on a daily basis. And those were the maximum doses I was able to have. Alongside that, I was also prescribed prednisolone, a corticosteroid, so a fast-acting anti-inflammatory. And at that point, my dose had been tapered down to 15 milligrams a day. And I was struggling with that, to be honest. As the dose of the prednisolone came down, my inflammatory symptoms started to return, which was a sign probably that the DMARDs weren't taking full effect. So the steroids were doing quite a lot of the work in terms of controlling my inflammatory symptoms. So the treatment plan at that point was that I was prescribed a systemic steroid injection, so a high dose of a more powerful steroid than I was taking in tablet form. That was called methylprednisolone, also known as depomedrone or depomedrol. So I had that about a week after the review appointment with the nurse. And there was also a plan in the pipeline to add a biologic DMARD, adalimumab specifically, which is a more powerful and more targeted treatment for autoimmune conditions like this. It's prescribed for lots of different things. I'd already had the preparatory screening done for that. That's done to check for any latent infections because biologics are more immunosuppressive, which can cause those latent infections to resurface. So they need to be dealt with first. Got the all clear on that. So after the appointment with the nurse, I was sent a booklet about adalimumab, just some generic information to kind of read and understand. And then an appointment was made for a month's time to talk about that in a bit more detail and make a final decision about that medication. I was very lucky that the medications weren't the only form of treatment I was able to have at this point in time, though, so I wanted to tell you about the others as well. So the first was physiotherapy. I had my first couple of physiotherapy appointments around this time. And in my first session, the physiotherapist examined my joints, got a sense of where things were for me functionally. She had access to my notes, of course, and she explained that my disease activity was still too high, so still too much active inflammation going on to be able to start developing a physio program for me. So the focus of those sessions needed to be on supporting and gently mobilizing my joints to preserve function and range of motion as much as possible. So in the first session, I was given a short routine for mobilizing the joints in my hands and wrists. And then in the second session, another routine for mobilizing the joints in my legs and feet was added in. And I really appreciated having those routines to do each day or most days, because that was something that I could do for myself while I was waiting to see if the DMARDs were going to work for me. There wasn't really much I could do myself to help that process along. So it was great to have something I could actively do. The physiotherapy sessions also combined elements of occupational therapy. So I was given a pair of activity splints to support my wrists and hands when I was doing things, daily tasks like preparing meals or typing, anything really. So these are my activity splints. Here, I still have them, and from time to time, I still need them. So this is how they fit on your hands. There's a metal plate here that's kind of shaped, so it really supports your wrist if it's very inflamed and into the hand as well. And then it fastens around the back with Velcro, and you can make it tighter or looser depending on how much swelling you have. So these were really helpful at the time, and I used them a lot. My physiotherapist also considered a walking stick for me because my walking was still quite affected, but she felt that my hands and wrists were too inflamed for me to be able to use a walking stick properly, so I wouldn't have been able to grip it firmly or hold it properly, so we didn't do that. But she did give me a book of some aids for day-to-day tasks that I might want to consider whether or not they'd help me as well, so I had that to look at after the appointment too. I was also referred for a podiatry assessment around this time because my mobility had been so affected and I was walking quite awkwardly. The podiatrist concluded at the assessment that the main issue for me at that point was the active inflammation. So the priority needed to be to focus on the medical treatments that could help to get the inflammation and the underlying disease process under control. However, because he also noticed some difficulties with my gait as I was trying to compensate for the inflammation in how I was walking, he also gave me some orthotic insoles to help to encourage good alignment in my feet and lower legs when I was standing up or when I was mobilizing, and also gave me some stretching exercises to help with strength and movement in my lower legs as well. So that was really helpful. If you would like to know a bit more about what that podiatry assessment involved and the advice I was given about footwear, I did manage to make a video about that around the time it happened, so I'll add a link to it somewhere on this screen so that you can easily find it if you are interested in that. After that appointment, based on the advice and the information I've been given about the importance of having supportive soles and alignment in the feet and lower legs with conditions like this to try and prevent kind of any secondary problems, I also got some mules with molded soles with arch support to wear as slippers around the house because at that point I was needing to spend a lot of time at home and the slippers I had no support or structure to them whatsoever. So I don't have the ones I bought at the time anymore because the uppers wore out, but I do have some very similar ones so I can show you what I mean. These are the ones I'm still wearing now. So as you can see, I'll just show one. The soles are very solid, so they're really supportive. And if you can, I don't know if this shows up very well, but there's arch support on the inside here. And then there's support around the heel, so it kind of cradles the foot and also at the toes. And they really do help, or I found them helpful anyway, for feeling more stable on my feet around the house. So I still use those now. Now let's come on to the effects of the medications that I was taking, because I know medications can be a source of apprehension for people starting this treatment journey, myself most definitely included. So first I'll talk about the effects on my symptoms, but also then I'll talk about side effects too. So, in terms of the effects the medications were having on my symptoms, I guess the main thing to say is at the 2 month point, my inflammatory symptoms, joint symptoms, had noticeably improved since diagnosis. So, things were definitely heading in the right direction. Day to day, what that translated as is simple tasks were just getting a little bit easier than they had been before. So, things like using cutlery, cooking utensils in the kitchen when I was preparing meals. I think by this point, I was able to hold a toothbrush in one hand. I'd been having to balance it between two hands before because I couldn't grip and I didn't have enough mobility in my fingers to hold a toothbrush because they're so thin. So maybe I've got a pen here. So I'd been having to balance a toothbrush like this for quite a long time around the time I was diagnosed. But I think I was able to hold a toothbrush in a more normal way by that point in time. And I was also noticing that the joints in my legs and my feet were feeling more stable. So although walking was still kind of quite difficult, I couldn't go very far or fast, I did feel a bit more confident and comfortable with being outside the house. So, although there definitely were improvements, these changes were happening quite gradually, even with the steroids that I was taking. My disease activity was still classed as severe at that point. So I was still a long way from what my normal had been before becoming unwell. It's maybe worth saying, or you may already know this yourself anyway, with conditions like this and with these medications that can take such a long time to kick in, 2 months post diagnosis is still considered really, really early days. Some people definitely do respond to treatment much quicker than I did, so they have a really good response to the steroids if they're taking those, or the DMARDs start to work sooner. So it definitely isn't like this for everybody. But if you find that you're having a slower response to the medications, like I did, a little bit of a longer path at the 2 month stage, there's every reason to think that things will continue to improve and they will keep getting better. It's just a bit of a waiting game. Let's also talk a little bit about medication side effects. So, starting with the prednisolone, with this medication, I wasn't finding that I was having any side effects that I considered really problematic or difficult to manage. I wasn't experiencing any weight gain, which is something that people can be quite concerned about with steroids. It can happen. But at this point, if anything, I'd lost a couple of pounds, which was either due to the ongoing active inflammation, that might have been one cause, but also because I'd had family members taking steroids in the past, I knew about that effect and I was trying to eat more healthily, most of the time at least, to try and counteract that. So I didn't have that side effect. I don't remember having any problems with disrupted sleep either. I was really lucky with that. I was still getting very tired and probably sleeping more than usual. Um, and I didn't notice any significant mood changes either. I did get the moon face, where your face becomes more rounded and puffy. I definitely did have that, and it was noticeable at that point. What I did notice though was side effects of tapering the steroid dose down, particularly once I got to about 20 milligrams and below. And with that, I started noticing cognitive effects like struggling to remember things that normally would be fine for me, events, information, anything. And also, if I was talking to someone, finding it hard to find the word for things, it was happening a lot, and it my mind would just go completely blank. And these things really did affect communication for me around this time, it made having a conversation with someone really quite difficult and very effortful. So it took a lot of energy. And that's one of the reasons why I found it hard to keep up with making videos, because even this was really difficult to do and to hold information in mind and then to verbally communicate that. Um, So that was one aspect. And then also with the steroid taper, I did notice that my mood would go a little bit flatter each time I was stepping the dose down. And I was just getting more tired. I had less physical energy. So although the steroids themselves weren't at that point giving me really difficult side effects, I was really lucky with that. Reducing the steroid dose definitely did have an effect. Coming on to methotrexate, I did have side effects with methotrexate as well. What I found is that after each weekly dose, I would feel quite zapped physically and mentally for a couple of days. People talk about a methotrexate hangover, and I would say, based on my own experience, that is quite an accurate description. So I would have things like headaches, feeling dizzy or woozy, a little bit nauseous, feeling extra tired. And also, when my dose was increased up to 25 milligrams, I noticed the hair loss restarting that I'd had when I was first becoming unwell that summer. So that restarted, and the hair loss was really quite noticeable. At that point, my hair was in really poor condition as well. So I will say I felt a little bit disheartened about that in conjunction with everything else that was going on. Last but not least, I was also taking hydroxychloroquine, and although it's a little bit difficult to separate everything out when you're taking a number of different medications and there's quite a lot going on, quite a lot of changes, I don't think there were any obvious side effects for me with hydroxychloroquine at all, and that's still the case. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about the emotional journey of going through the diagnosis and early stages of treatment with inflammatory arthritis, because it is a process that can be quite challenging, and it's also a process that I think can feel quite lonely. So I want to share a little bit of how I was feeling about everything that was going on at this point in time, in the hope that that might be supportive or company or might help with not feeling so alone with it. At the point I was diagnosed, it felt like a huge relief that was a diagnosis, that treatment was going to start, that the rheumatology team was involved. And so at that point in time, I kind of approached the situation quite actively, tried to learn as much as I could about the condition, about the medications I was taking, anything I could do to help the treatment process along myself, trying to find out about all of those things. So, although I was quite limited in what I could do physically, I would say my approach was quite active as it could be, and I felt positive that all of this was happening. Around the 2 month mark, I started to notice a change in how I was feeling. So I was starting to feel a little bit flat. Um, and after an initial kind of flurry of treatments and learning and trying to find things out, things started to feel like they were going a little bit quiet. And there was still plenty happening with my treatment. I was just talking about the appointments I was very lucky to have with the rheumatology team and the podiatry team. And the physiotherapist. But around that, things started to feel a little quiet, and like it was really just a case of just waiting and waiting to see what the medications were going to do, what effect they were going to have. And I think by this point, I was also reaching saturation point with the amount of information that I could take in about the medical side of things. And it also didn't necessarily feel helpful to keep trying to learn more and more anyway, because it wasn't translating into anything that I could really practically do day to day to try and help myself. So I was a little bit in overload, I think. That did also include the patient forums that I've been joining to kind of share my own experience, but also try and learn from the experience of other people who are on this path as well. And that have been so helpful, so supportive, so reassuring at the very initial stages. But what I was finding, for me at least, is that being active on those patient forums also has a flip side to it, because usually when people are posting on these forums, it's because they're going through some challenges with their treatment or their condition. So they're looking for advice, they're looking for support, they're looking for information, they might be looking to offload. And it's really, really important to have a space where that can happen. It's so valuable. But what it does also mean is it tends to give a slightly skewed impression of what life with inflammatory arthritis is actually like, because you see all of these difficulties. But the people whose medication is working really well and it's not impacting too much on their daily lives, or they've found ways to manage it, generally aren't posting on a forum. They're getting on with those things. So, yeah, I think I had been starting to absorb the kind of challenges and complications that I was reading other people were dealing with. Um, Maybe 20, 30, 50 years into living with inflammatory arthritis. And I was kind of absorbing that into my sense of my own situation. And that was just feeling kind of heavy. It was adding to the sense of apprehension, the natural uncertainties that I was already carrying. Um, so I'd say that my head was just feeling too full of rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory arthritis in general, around this time. And at that point, I was also struggling a bit, I'd say, with the cognitive effects of the steroid taper alongside the physical effects of the rheumatoid arthritis itself, with the hair loss, with the general uncertainty of not knowing how much or when the medications were really going to kick in for me, what, where things were going to go. So all in all, I'd say that this kind of period around the 2 month mark was a bit of a rough patch for me. And I want to be open about what this experience was like. Of course, everybody is different and responds in their own way, but perhaps sharing this is helpful if you're right at the start of this process, just to be aware that this is how it can be from time to time. There are ups and downs, of course, there are, with navigating a new diagnosis and however the symptoms are presenting for you, however they're affecting day to day life. I think it's completely natural, but maybe forewarned can help with navigating this aspect. Of the process a little bit, or maybe you've been through this and you know what I'm talking about. And I know for a lot of people and for myself at times, it can feel quite lonely dealing with this. Even very kind or well-meaning people may find it difficult to understand exactly what it's like, but hopefully this channel can be a space where we do understand what it's like and can be a support, especially during those more challenging times. So with the final part of this video, what I'd like to talk about now are the things that were helping at this stage. Even though things were a bit difficult for me, there were plenty of things that were helping as well. So I want to share those in case that's helpful for anybody else. So the first thing was to keep going with the things that were within my control. So for me at this point, it was the joint mobility routines I've been given by the physiotherapist, the stretches from the podiatrist, eating as well as I could, so trying to eat more healthily. And I also looked for opportunities to contribute to research projects about inflammatory arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis at the early stages, to try and take something positive out of this experience. So I did some online surveys. One of the studies, I had a Zoom interview. I've done a couple of focus groups, things like that, and all of that felt like I was using these experiences in a positive way, in a beneficial way. Secondly, I stepped back from the online patient groups and forums I'd been participating in and from trying to read and learn about rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory arthritis. My head was just kind of full, I think, at that stage of all of that information. And I am aware of the irony of kind of saying this in a video talking about patient experience of inflammatory arthritis, but I just think different things are helpful at different times, maybe, or for different people. We all need different things. And for me at that point, I needed to take a step back and focus my attention on other things for a while. One of those things for me was getting back to my meditation practice. It's something that's been part of my life for a really long time, but it had become very patchy as I was becoming unwell. And getting back to it wasn't as straightforward as it might sound because of the physical and cognitive limitations I was dealing with at the time. So, to give myself some impetus for that, I joined a really short 3 day online retreat. So, just a couple of sessions each day. But it was so helpful to connect with a teacher, to connect with the teachings, to connect with other people with that shared interest and that shared practice. And that really helped me in a number of ways. I think partly because a lot of my usual coping strategies for dealing with a difficult situation or a stressful situation just weren't available to me. So I couldn't go for a run, journaling, practicing yoga, going for a long walk or a hike. I just couldn't do those things. But meditation was something that I could try to find a way to come back to that felt familiar, that felt like me. A lot was very unfamiliar at that point in time, and the experience was quite disorienting. So I found it quite centering and very helpful to kind of try to make my meditation practice a focus again in some shape or form. Um, and it also reminded me, that retreat, of an important attitudinal aspect of meditation, which is sometimes called don't know mind. It's really just an invitation to remember that really and truly we don't know what's going to happen from one moment to the next in life, let alone what's going to happen in the months or years to come. Life has a way of surprising us, and just remembering that can really help to cultivate a feeling of openness and a focus on what's actually happening in the here and now, and maybe letting go kind of ideas or fears about what the future might hold, because it might never hold those things. And I think particularly because I had been becoming a little bit weighed down, I think, a little bit anxious maybe, because of some of the things I was reading and some of the information I was encountering, it really helped me to let some of that weight go, and just focus on doing the best I could with my situation in that, as it was in that moment, and approach things with almost a little bit of curiosity about what those next moments were going to hold for me. In fact, I found that kind of balanced out the sort of very natural apprehension about an uncertain situation. And that helped me, I think, to start feeling a little bit lighter. On a practical level, I did look into the occupational therapy aids in the booklet that my physiotherapist gave me. So I also wanted to share some of the things that I found quite helpful in day-to-day life. One thing was to replace my heavy stoneware crockery that I couldn't safely lift at that point in time with enamel plates, which are very, very lightweight. So I'll show you the ones I got. So these ones were fantastic. They're really light, and also they've got a lip. So if you're struggling with using cutlery, it helps to have the edge on the plate. And I also got some cups like that as well. They were really helpful. I also got an adapted knife, which I haven't got here right now, but it's got a sideways handle on it, and it helps because it means that you can keep, if your wrists are affected, you can keep your wrists straight when you're cutting things, and that really helps with preventing damage to the joints. More things for the kitchen, so an electric tin opener, absolute game changer, would recommend, have used this so much over the last few years. A jar key, and a jar opener. Both of these absolutely essential. It's amazing how much food you can't get into if your hands are very inflamed and very painful. Also, compression gloves. These were really, really helpful for me, I found, both because of the pressure they apply if your hands are very inflamed in your wrist, but also because of the warmth. And I also had the activity splints and the orthotic insoles and the slippers that I mentioned earlier. So there was quite a lot going on at the 2 month stage post diagnosis. Very much a steep learning curve for me, lots of adjustments to still be navigating and finding my way with. So thank you very much if you're still here, if you stayed to the end. I really appreciate you being here. As I was saying at the start, I'm planning to make this a series to cover the first 8 or 9 months or so, maybe a little bit longer post diagnosis, so that it can be a resource on this channel. So if there's anything else you would like me to be including in these monthly updates, please do let me know and I will incorporate everything I can into the next ones. So thank you very much again for watching, and I will see you again soon.